We're back in our third video for this series of using modifiers. We want to do a shell modifier for our third video. So I'm just going to slide this picture out of the way here and let's get started. We have our taper, our twisted taper. Okay, I'm going to leave those on just so that I can line this up and do my next one, and then I'll shut those off in my Scene Explorer here. So I'm just going to grab a box. This one I'm going to make a little longer rectangle. I don't really mind what shape you do. Let's do this. And if you notice, it is making our box 2 by 2 by 11. Okay, we will change that up in a few minutes, figure out what's best for our shape here. Now that my box is done, I'm going to change my name right away. Get used to naming things. Okay. Now, I don't mind the 001 because there might be more than other things in my scene, but for now, I know that this is going to be a basic scene. This is just a practice, so we're just going to call this the shell modifier. So I'm just going to keep it simple and call this shell. Okay, I click off of that. Let's change our segments right now. For the height, I'm just going to make that 2 as well. Okay. Let's go over into my Scene Explorer, simplify our scene by turning these off, and we can center this with our zoom extent selected here. Let's go into our Modify tab. So remember, Modify is the square, gives me all of the little grab handles. And then we're going to pull this down and let's add a shell modifier on here. Just see what happens, okay? And that's going to be, there's so many different modifiers in here. We're not going to have time to go through very many of them in class. Please play around with them and do some really neat things with them. Find them in other tutorials and roll with them. But if I just add the shell modifier, now it added a shell, but it didn't really look like it did much. It kind of puffed out the sides of our boxes, but it doesn't look anything like mine where it hollowed it out. Why not? Okay, let's look what's going on. Right now we have edge faces, which means our box is solid and we can't see inside of it. If I turn that off and I turn my wireframe over right on, see, it hollowed out my box here, but we can't see any inside of it because our lid of our box is closing it off and we just can't see inside. So how do we change that up? Well, if we're going to do that, let's think of this as maybe a roof in a large city scene here. Okay, I'm going to turn my wireframe back off. Before I do this shell modifier, let's get rid of this. I'm going to right click on this modifier. I'm going to go down here and delete the modifier. So we're left with the box. Let's change this box up, okay, and get rid of the top. Right now I can't click on it. If I click on it to get rid of it and I click on the top and I hit delete, the whole shape disappears. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to go undo. This is my undo, or Control Z. Okay. We want to modify this rectangle, this box, and just get rid of one shape. So there's a modifier in our list for that. There's other ways to find it, and we'll use some other shortcuts in the future. But this is a polygon. Okay. Polygon is just a fancy word for a 3-dimensional shape. It could be anything from a sphere, rectangle, cone, cylinder. Those are all polygons. We want to edit our polygon, so we're going to find Edit Poly. I apply that to my scene, and that gives us some tools of some things we can specifically do. We're not going to worry about any of this. Later on, we'll split and cut and kind of change this up. But for now, all we want to do is we want to select the top. We want to select the top and delete it. So here under selection, I can do the whole shape. If I click on the element, the whole thing highlights, and I hit delete and the whole thing deletes. I don't want to do that. I click on just the polygon, okay, at the top, and I can click on one here. If I go to click on the next one, it only does one at a time. I can hold Control down and I can multi-select, or I can go back to my box here and I can turn my length segments back down to 1 and my width to 1. And this is why earlier we said that we don't want to have more segments in here than we really need because when we go to edit and change this up, the more that we have, the more complicated our scene is. We don't want to do that if it's not necessary. So I'm going to change this back to length 1, width 1 in my box here. Then I go back to edit poly in my list, go here, and I got my auto save turned on, but I'm just going to go back up. Remember, save often, file save, get in the habit. I go selection, we're going to grab polygon, which is just the top, and I click on the top. Now that is highlighted with this orange salmon color. Hit delete on your keyboard, should be above the backspace on most keyboards, and it's gone. Now we're ready to go back in and add the shell modifier on top of our edit poly. Okay, so we're going to pull our list down. So this is once again a compound modification, because first we edit poly, now we shell it. Okay, so we're going to go shell, and now if you notice that added a nice 3D shape to our box, and you can adjust the amount that it's shelled. If you want to keep the original size of the box and have it expand to the outside instead of the inside, feel free to do that. This is just to show that you're able to do it. Okay, you can add, I'm not going to really worry about anything else here, but my box is done. We have it called shell. I'm going to turn on the rest of these shapes, and we are going to come back in one last video, and we are going to add another box and use the spherify in order to make this round, and we'll discuss why we want to do that in certain circumstances. Thanks for joining me in this one, and we will see you in the next one.